New York was rough. New York was really rough. And I remember, I think about the moment when I was most down. And you've got your family, your wife and your kids living in a little apartment, all looking at you like we followed you all the way across the world for this dream, Dad. And now Dad's dream has died. And I was like, what am I going to do?
Hi, and welcome to your Access All Areas podcast, where we talk candidly to Australia's finest performing artists about their lives and the lessons they have learned along the way. So welcome to McLaren Versus. My guest today is a true artistic chameleon, someone who refuses to be boxed in by any single label. EddiePerfect is a singer, songwriter, comedian, actor, playwright and composer whose career has been a masterclass in reinvention. From cutting his teeth on the Melbourne comedy and cabaret scene to stealing the show in Offspring, from writing and starring in boundary-pushing theatre to conquering Broadway with his Tony-nominated score for Beetlejuice. Eddie is constantly evolving, constantly challenging himself and never content to stand still. And today we're going to dive into what drives that relentless creativity and how he navigates the highs and lows of reinvention and of course, what's next for one of Australia's most fearless multi-hyphenates. This is McLaren versus EddiePerfect. Eddie, welcome to the show. You've built an incredible career as a performer and writer across, music, theatre, television, comedy. Is this the career you envisioned when you started out?
Oh, no. I'm still reeling from that intro. That made me sound fantastic. I think often I get emails from people who are like, I want to work in theatre, I want to write musicals, or, how do I do it? And they're in high school. I had no idea that I would be doing this work when I was in high school. Not because I just didn't actually think it was a possibility. It wasn't even like a dream, because in order to dream something, you have to kind of imagine that it's achievable in some way. And where I grew up, there wasn't really anyone working in theatre or working in show business, so it didn't seem like it was accessible to me. And in my private moments, I liked singing and I liked music. I've always had an affinity with music, and I sang in choirs, and I really enjoyed listening to musical theatre and all kinds of music, and playing it and making it and mucking around with it. But I wanted to be a visual artist, so the fact that I'm now writing musicals and working in the theatre is a real surprise to me, and it's just been a process of falling ass backwards into things and following, the next step and the next step. The only kind of governing principle has been, get passionate about the thing, work out how to do the thing, kind of head to the little island of the thing, stand on the island of the thing and go, this is pretty good. And then where's the next little island,
Yeah.
And so a lot of it has been self-taught, especially because, musical theatre and the creation of musical theatre in Australia is something that is very fledgling in this country. But I've been very lucky to have performing and writing go hand in hand. So my apprenticeship out of drama school was really writing solo cabaret comedy shows. And that's where I learnt how to not just, to write songs that connected with people, but songs that made people laugh, that had ideas and jokes and were musically literate and had beginning and middle and end and were theatrical and weren't boring. And the great thing about performing my own material in the early days in my 20s was, it was a real crash course in an education in writing for the stage, because especially with comedy, you can hear when it's going very badly. It's quiet. And so you can't fool yourself. So I got to learn about clarity, which is something I'm still obsessed with. Like, I think number one, it's like, does this idea make sense? And then way down is other things like style and tone and even comedy comes later to clarity because there's no jokes if people don't understand them. So learning out of a structure of songs so that it was like an argument all the way through that was logical and led people along a path that included, what Sondheim used to call surprising but inevitable, like that was always sort of interesting and surprising. So, it is a surprise to me. It's a long-winded way of saying it. It's a surprise to me I've ended up where I've ended up, but I've sort of just followed my nose and my passion.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting 'cause you talk about, there wasn't, or music theatre is, writing it is fledgling in Australia. And I'm going to say we met like 30-something years ago and back around the amateur theatre worlds, of amateur musicals and that kind of stuff. And you're absolutely right. At the time, I can't even think of an example of a show from Australia that had gone to Broadway back then. I mean, we're very lucky now that there's a number of them. I hope this continues, as we all do. You really are paving the way there and having to find your own feet. And I think it's fascinating you talk about doing it on the comedy scene because, like you say, it's brutal. And if you aren't taking them with you, you're going to know pretty quickly.
It's brutal, but it's accessible.
We start off talking about how many different things you do. As well. I think we've probably led to a place where we've sort of answered this a little bit, but I'm just really curious about whether you can see or recognise that there's a core in all the different things that you do. And if so, what would you say that is?
Making middle-class people feel bad about themselves.
That's absolutely true. You are 100% correct.
No, it's about the it's like I often think about that because I go, there are so many different lives we could all live and so many places we could live. So why do we keep coming back to the same places? Why, what as an artist, I feel like I want to be having a conversation with people.
Yeah.
And that's like the best thing you can have is to be relevant to a cultural conversation. Almost good or bad, really. So if you're Margot Robbie and you make Barbie, you're having a really big cultural conversation, like having a conversation with the world. There's an extraordinary position to be in, and that's an amazing thing that art can do. And so in a small way, I'm like, I always choose projects based on them having something personal that I feel like these characters are either experiencing something that I have experienced or that I have something to say, or there's a message inside it that I think is worth talking about. And whenever I've been involved in a show where I haven't had that, it's really hard to know how to access the material. Beetlejuice is a black comedy, and that's really my wheelhouse, but it's about the fear of death and what happens when we experience grief and loss and our sense of home is shattered and we're surrounded by people who don't want to acknowledge it or talk about it. That's what happens to Lydia in Beetlejuice, the musical. I am really fortunate that both my parents are still healthy and both alive. But my wife, Lucy, lost her mother at the age of 8. And so a huge amount of the insights into what it's like to lose a mother as a young girl is my wife's experience that she very generously shared with me and allowed to go into the character of Lydia. So while it's a comedy, which is really the only way I think, well, the only way I can see to tackle things that make people uncomfortable is to find a way to, as soon as you're laughing at something, there's a level of comfort. Yeah. No one wants to really face their death.
It's a release as well, isn't it? Like, because you get very...
It is.
And it allows you to continue to digest.
It is. And if you can create a show, and it took a long time to get this right with Beetlejuice, but if you can create a show that's a world that gives people permission to laugh at something uncomfortable and they accept it, that's a really great space to be. So, yeah, I think we don't talk about this a lot in Australia because it feels weird coming out of my mouth. But I've always wanted to be an artist. That's what always wanted to be. And I do consider myself an artist, and I'm really lucky that I make a living at it. It doesn't mean that I am this pure temple of artistic integrity. I make terrible mistakes. I make bad decisions. Sometimes I'm motivated not by artistic integrity, but sometimes by ego, and I've had my ass handed to me at those times that I've done that. Sometimes, I've had to make decisions based on money, but I would hope that they weren't necessarily greedy situations. There were situations where I'm like, I've got a family, I've got a mortgage, I've got kids, got education, I've got to pay for things. So
Especially being middle class, absolutely.
Middle class, it's a lot to keep up.
It's a lot to keep
I've got all these pets.
Private school, it's so much.
Yeah.
Poodles,
I've
knee
got
clipping,
a fucking Aussie Shepherd with elbow dysplasia. Like, Jesus Christ. So, and we all have to make smart decisions about stuff. And sometimes you do a gig because, it might lead to another gig, but it is a life. I think that's always been the life of an artist. And I think that we have a tendency sometimes to romanticize what art has been, that there are somehow these people, if you pick any artist on the planet, they've always answered to somebody. Mm. I mean, Bach had to write a mass every week. He was an artist, but he was like, God demands mass. Mass is going to happen on Sunday. Yes. I got to be ready for that. There were patrons. Mozart had patrons. There are people that are like, you need to write this opera and not that opera. Yep. We know that happened with Shakespeare. We know that every artist has a commercial imperative to please the people that are benefactors, or the theatre, or the producer, or the tax man, or the landlord that's knocking on the door. And I actually see all of those things as incredibly helpful to art. And the idea of being an artist that has no deadline, no pressure, is just the most uncreative thing I could ever think of.
Can it even exist, really? Is that like some kind of mythological space where that none of that exists, because you always have pressures to eat or do. And if you've got all the money in the world and you're doing all of that, then, like you said, there's no imperative, there's no pressure, there's no input, you become in a vacuum, and doesn't that kill?
It does me. I mean, I know other artists would like, I would like nothing better than a studio space and 12 months and just no idea what's going to come out. It could be anything. And I'm like, no, I want an idea. I need to execute it. I need it to work with an audience. I want to connect with people and make art that means something to people. Yeah. And it's successful. And I always think about an audience when I'm writing. I mean, I'm interested in that. And I really, not that I don't think it shouldn't exist, but art that doesn't care about an audience fucking drives me crazy. I actually appreciate it, because sometimes these extraordinary things come out of this, of like the freedom of not having to entertain or interest anybody.
Yeah.
But, oh my God, we've sat through that stuff. When you're like, why is it?
I don't understand what is this function? Who is this for? Like, if it's not for anybody, why are we making it? Is it not an indulgent expression then of just something within, which is fine, but then why put it in front of people if it wasn't designed for people? So I remember, if we can wind back, I think we've only ever actually done one job together, which was Take Flight. Do you remember that?
That's right. Yes, that was such a lovely experience.
Yeah, and I always remember, though, you would bounce in every morning with a little limerick contest going with David Shire, and you guys have little limerick offs and that kind of thing. And there was such a passion and a joy to that exchange all the time, and everything you did there. And I'm just wondering, where did that come from? Have you always been like ultra positive, or you just love what you were doing in those moments? Or
I think it's interesting. I go up and down, as I think it's really natural for actors and to go up and down with their feeling about acting. Mm-hmm. And we've both done theatre and we've both done TV, and the thing about TV is it's almost like kind of keeps you at arm's length, and it never lets you act the way you want to act, and then you don't have any control over how it's going out, and then you don't really rehearse that much.
No, it's really insane, the lack of rehearsal. It's very organic, if you want to use that phrase.
even when you're main cast, and it's, like, as you would know, like having done TV series, you're sort of part of the furniture there. You're a bit of furniture off to the side. The mechanism of it, all the cameras and the first AD and everything happening is bigger than you, and your job is to fit in with that and to make sure that you don't clog up the system, and to act when you're told to act, and then to go away and wait when you're told to go away.
A lot of that, a lot of waiting.
Yep. Go and eat a sandwich now. Go and, you get shuffled around. Whereas theatre, which is undeniably less celebrated and less remunerated, is so much more joyous, because every day there's a room full of creative people. And when I was in drama school, I was being directed by Rhys McConaughey in something. Rhys, amazing man. He was directing us in some Chekhov scenes, and I'd never done Chekhov before. And there was a bit of blocking that I wasn't really kind of sure about, and I went up to him and I was like, I'm not really sure why I come on here and then I have to go over there. And he said, well, that sounds like an actor's problem, doesn't it? And I was like, oh, that's amazing. I was like, oh, that's my job. Like, and I think there's a lot of drama schools, like finding out what is my job as an actor. Because, part of it is like, I've got to learn the lines but you go, well, what does a director do? Do they just tell me what to do? And this is how I want it. And then your job is to, no, it's not. It's you come into a room as a creative person with a whole bunch of tools that you've got, hopefully, useful tools. And you're collaborating with the director to create a performance and with your fellow actors. And all of that goes a lot better if there's no fear.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of love in the room and a lot of generosity and curiosity and play. So I really, as I get older and my world shrinks and I have, less sort of wide social circles, because I'm a dad and I've, working, and, it's like you get older, it's sort of, when you get into a room full of actors now, I am so grateful for the other people and to work with the director, and I love that process so much. And working on Take Flight was incredible because we got to work with artists from New York.
And on something new, which is just like we were saying at the start of this, very, very rare.
Very rare, and they don't really know how it goes. And your job is to help bring it to life. And there's what I love about musical theatre is, unless especially new musicals, is you're just in totally uncharted territory. No one's done this role before. No one knows how it's supposed to go. It's really limited by the actor's imagination.
Have you, across your journey to so far, because it's not ended, by the way, we should have it to say we're not in the afterlife.
Thank Christ for that.
I know, lucky, eh? And have you had any mentors or people, because it's like we talk about that to and fro with Maltby and Shire and that, and I seem to recall you guys did stay in touch for a while. And have you had mentors on your journey? I mean, not only as a writer, but as an actor and performer.
I think absolutely. I've always sort of learnt. I've always felt like I've maybe found myself out of my depth.
Yeah.
And then I just look around to see how people are swimming. That's really how it goes. So I remember when I got the gig on Offspring, I'd never been a regular in a series television show before. And most of my experience had been, with theatre and with, being on stage and doing comedy. And it was certainly one thing. And now we're doing, not just naturalism, not theatrical naturalism, but like film and TV naturalism. And I remember watching, like Asher Keddy and John Waters and Deb Mailman.
Bunch of hacks.
Oh, my God. And the first thing I noticed that we could be in like a room like this, and they'd be acting off in a corner doing a scene, and I wouldn't even necessarily be able to hear them, even though I'm in the same room. So I'm like, oh, the size of this is so small. And I learnt how, to see Asher Keddy, how she would work with the directors and with the first AD. She wasn't just passive. She obviously had agency on that set, but she would use it in a really creative way to go, what about this? Or how about we try this? Or how do we order the shot so that I can, build a ramp to an emotionally intense place when you're when you're here
Yeah.
rather than when you're all the way back there with the
Yeah.
camera. And I was like, oh, okay. Those things you learn by watching other people. So that was a learning experience. But in terms of theatre, I pick up stuff from everybody. I remember working with Bartlett Sher on South Pacific. He's an extraordinary director from the Lincoln Center Theatre over in New York, and very smart and very literate. And I learned a lot from working with him. I learned a lot about writing musicals by being in musicals, and that has been great. So yeah, I learned something from everyone. I think you kind of have to be a perpetual student, and perpetually curious. I think the minute you walk on stage or in a rehearsal room or you know everything, you need to have humility, I think, and be flexible. As a writer and a collaborator, you need to be able to cut and listen and change and adapt, and you don't be the kind of person that digs their heels in and goes, no, I won't cut my material. You need to be fluid all the time, and that means, I think kind of you gotta have an ego. You gotta have a sense of yourself. You don't want to be a doormat, but you do have to have an open mind and be like, I think, a kind of a curious, open, adaptable person, no matter how high up the pecking order you think you are.
I mean, you used that word with Ashley before, agency. I think that's a great one, is that, and having just, you talked about off air before, like having just worked with her on Fake and watching her, she produced that as well and was in the DNA of the beginning, but watching somebody really who understands all elements of the craft, kind of,
yes,
but be open and play and just kind of go, we want to go here, I'm thinking this, but what's everyone else got,
Yes.
And then group decision, off you go, bang, and then voila, the magic occurs.
See, I thought that was really interesting, and because I'd only ever seen that in theatre, I hadn't seen it on a TV set before, and there were times when that would get combative, and I thought it was really good. I thought it was really interesting because everybody's doing the same thing. I've certainly seen poorly behaved actors in both the theatre and on film and TV sets.
Name names. Shame.
Yeah. where it's always, I think most of the time it's about fear.
Yeah.
Somebody's afraid.
Uncomfortable or being
and
pushed and they go, I don't want to expose.
Yes, and so there'll be lots of issues and it's about getting somebody to give them attention and calm them down. That's sort of what they're wanting.
So, broadly speaking, big ticket question here, the big why. Why do you, what drives you to do what you do? I'm really intrigued for you, as I said, like having seen you over so many years grow and evolve into, what is it that gets you out of bed every morning?
I don't know, it's a really interesting one, because you could do extraordinary things, and even then, what do they matter? Is it, you know what I mean? Does anything matter at all?
I mean, it depends where your lens is, isn't it? Like, if you're in the room, then you pull out until you become an ant, and you go, well, does any of this even matter at all? The big kind of questions about, are we alone in the universe, all that sort of stuff, and at some point you kind of go, well, if I start thinking like that, I'll never do anything.
I know.
So you've got to find your balance of where your frame is, I guess, and how you function. I
know. I mean, but at the same time, I think it's important for people to question why they are doing the things they're doing. Because some people are in a existence that's maybe not serving them, or it's causing a huge amount of pain. And there's a sense that, that's what you do. You go to work and But I mean, I'm not going down the salt mine, so there's it's a privilege to do what it is I do, and even though it has some negative aspects to it and a lot of uncertainty, I'm genuinely really grateful for it. Sometimes I go, why don't I just act? Because if I could be employed as an actor all my life, I don't have to think about the show, I don't have to write the show. When I finish my rehearsals, I go home, I don't have to rewrite it, I don't have to cast it. All I have to do is turn up in the room. I love acting, it's really fun. But after I've done that for a long time, a little light, a little warning light turns on going, yeah, but this is not of you. This is not your idea. You didn't make this world.
Yep.
What if you made the world? What if it was, your world? And so there's that little, I guess that little.
Somewhere there's a driver in you
Yeah.
that says you want a passion to physically create, not just invest someone else's creation with life.
I know, but you do it, and I made something like Beetlejuice, and it's crazy because it happens without me. It's happening all over the world. People turn up in a theatre in Prague or Sweden at the moment.
As we speak,
Yeah.
here you are.
And there's a whole show going that I wrote, and yet it doesn't scratch that itch because I'm like, well, what do I do next? And
Because you've launched that now, right? That's off.
yeah, it doesn't need me anymore.
Yeah.
But it also does. I don't rest on my laurels going, well, that's great. I don't ever have to do anything again. I'm like,
'Cause the itch.
no, I've still got this. I've still got this art form that I feel like I'm getting better at, and I feel like the new stuff that I'm writing is far superior and far more sophisticated, and I'm still a long way to go. But that's a great thing about art, is that it's a practice, and you're having a conversation with your audience, but also when I sit down at the piano, I'm having a conversation with myself. What can this music be?
Oh, excellent. There's a couple of things we touched on there that I'll dive in a little bit more, and one is, I guess, the highs and lows, self-esteem. If we use Beetlejuice as an example, I went and reread the original Broadway review, rough, bumpy start from a critical, New York Times perspective.
Yeah.
How, but since then, massive fan favourite, like you say, productions all over the world, as we know about, open here as well in Australia. How do you ride that roller coaster?
Well, New York was rough. New York was really rough. It was really up and down. I mean, extremes of up and down. And I remember, I think about the moment when I was most down. The feeling, the bad feeling inside me was I had a shot at writing for Broadway, which is something I've always wanted to do, and it hasn't worked out, and that's the end of that. Probably never get asked back, and it's quite extraordinary when you have the possibility of a dream ahead of you. There's always something to work towards, even if it's feels far away. It's still ahead of you, but it's a very different feeling when you have it in your hands and you
feel
drop
like
it and it
it's dead
smashes on the ground.
and it's ended.
And you've got your family, your wife and your kids living in a little apartment, all looking at you like we've followed you all the way across the world for this dream, Dad, and now Dad's dream has fucking died. And I was like, what am I going to do? And even in that really dark moment, I was still like, I'm going to fucking write musicals. I'm just going to keep doing it. I remember talking to my New York agent and saying, I'll just go away and I'll find the next project and I'll write the next project. I don't know whether that's self-belief or whether that's insanity or whether I just don't have an imagination about other things I could do. I mean, I feel like...
Yes, and yet.
Yeah. Although I did come up with an idea of a music theatre themed toasted sandwich truck that I could drive around.
Is that opening night of Beetlejuice here? I expect to see that, as catering.
Coming to a festival near you.
Jesus.
I'll have one Jean Valjean, thank you very much. We're all waiting to find out whether we're deluded or not. You know what I mean? And some people are deluded. I felt like, I had something to offer and that I was going to keep working on it, even when it looked really bad. And then the next day, the Tony nominations came out and Beetlejuice was nominated for... I literally threw my phone into my bag and walked into Central Park, there's a part where there's all these finches that go crazy and it's just really loud, but it's also kind of a nice white noise. It's called the Rambles in Central Park. And so I was in there hanging out with the birds. I really like birds. Just because birds, you look at birds and you're like, there's a whole reality going on with birds that has nothing to do with musicals. They don't give a fuck about musicals. They just, you know what I mean? And I find that...
Except for the meadowlark.
The meadow...
for those in the know.
I mean, we pull birds into musicals, but they're like, they don't care.
Yeah.
And I think that's sort of grounding to go, you know what, this is not the centre of the world. It's fine. Perspective. Zoom out.
Yeah. And
I thought, okay, they're going to do, because they announced the Tony nominations like 8 a.m. in the morning, because New York is this sadistic place where that kind of happens. And I was like, you can usually gauge your Tony prospects by this award season on Broadway. There's like the Lucille Lortel Awards, the Drama Critics Awards, the Outer Circle, like whatever. There's fucking heaps of them. And Beetlejuice didn't get any of them or hardly even nominated. So it was not looking good. But then when I got back and turned my phone on, all these messages from my agent that we'd been nominated. And that was like so extraordinary, because I went from being depressed in my pajamas, no reason to leave the apartment, to having to put a suit on and go down to the Sofitel in Midtown and do this press junket in there for all the Tony nominees.
So you've literally been slung from the bottom of the barrel.
Like, I'm back, baby.
I love it.
This is fucking crazy. And all of a sudden, I'm in my suit, like meeting people and talking about success rates. The day before, I was like, okay, well, I'm a failure. And it aged me about 1 million years. And I love New York, but I was sort of like happy to come back to Australia and now to kind of go over and work there and plug into the energy of it, but also to be able to take myself away from it, because I don't think I have the constitution that thrives on hustle culture.
Yeah. All right. The other thing we touched on prior to this as well was that idea of legacy. Like, do you talked about before about you die, it gets crumpled up and gone and forgotten forever. I mean, do you?
Yeah.
Are you conscious of wanting to leave something behind?
It's a tricky one. I'm like, well, I could die and all my work fades into obscurity. I'll be dead. So what? There's the other version of it where I die and then like Vincent van Gogh, suddenly everyone's obsessed with my music and it makes all this money, and then it becomes a burden to my kids who have to manage their EddiePerfect estate.
What a burden.
You know what I mean? That becomes their life where they're you want to do an all-female version of Shane Warne the musical? Have to make this. You know what I mean?
Yes.
You see that with people, that they run the estate and they're like, oh, we want to do a version where everyone's a possum.
Because that's the Rodgers and Hammerstein estate now, essentially. I
know.
And others, of course.
Leonard Bernstein estate. I think Jamie Bernstein, his daughter, runs that.
Yeah.
I mean, these are all problems that, thankfully...
The middle class face.
You don't have to deal with it because I'll be dead. So I don't know about legacy. I would... Okay, here's one thing I would like. I would... Before I shuffle off this earth, I would like to strengthen the pathways for artists to be able to make musicals in this country, in Australia.
Yep.
And I would like to strengthen the connections between artists in this country and places like Broadway and the West End.
Yep.
I don't think it's my responsibility or I even have the power to do that. I just mean to be a part of... that some of my work is about making my own work, but it's also about helping other people make work. If you think about the commercial work that is performed here, it's mostly inherited from Broadway.
Yep.
And what I think people probably don't appreciate is that the pool of work that is being invested in and developed in New York is huge. If you think of it like an iceberg, and then the very tip of the iceberg is the stuff that works. And then in Australia, we just sort of take the tip off the tip of the iceberg, and that becomes what we see as musical theatre. But that tiny tip of the tip represents this entire iceberg of companies, corporations, mums and dads, all investing in the creation of new musical theatre works, most of which will never live to see the stage, some of which will make the stage and close within a week or two. And we really have to start making more of our work here and supporting our writers and finding structures to be able to not just develop our own work, but to learn how to develop work, which is an art form in itself. So if I can die having helped other artists to become writers of musical theatre, and so that it's not so much like, you would know this, you make a musical in this country and it's like you have to invent the wheel again. Every new Australian musical is like an anomaly.
Yes.
It's not like, oh, well, this came out of this pathway of development. It's like people are like, I've got an idea. Let's just completely create a developmental structure around it of our own.
Yep.
And I feel like we can help people. There are a lot of good artists that need to be nurtured, and we're not doing that. And it's time that we did it.
5 quick questions that I always kind of just throw at people.
Great.
Kind of, looking for the bumper sticker answers, sum everything up in one line. Philosophies, do you have a mantra you live by?
I have a few. Turn up. Be fun.
Yeah.
Be kind. And be curious.
Love it. Great. Looking back at your influences to date, who do you think has taught you the most important lesson?
Well, my wife taught me a big lesson. Like, she taught me how to apologise. And I wasn't bad at apologising, but this is not the bumper sticker version. But I've learned a lot of things from my wife. But in the middle, we can be in the middle of an argument, and she will not dig her heels into an ideological position just for the sake of winning. If she gets fresh evidence, she will just change her mind and go, oh, yeah, that's a good point. I'm sorry. You're right. And as a consequence, it is like this superpower. I wish people could just teach it to people. Like, when you're wrong, and I think we know we're wrong, but we feel bad about being wrong.
And there's something you feel that won't let you let go in some ways? You just got to...
Human thing where it's like, oh, if I win this, I won't have to face the shame of the fact that I'm wrong. But sometimes even like she'll do it with complete strangers. Like, she'll get into an argument with a stranger and they'll be like, but you did this. And she'll be like, oh, actually, you're right. Yeah, you're right. I'm really sorry. And you just watch the anger
dissipate and
just vanishes. The power of apologising is unbelievable. And I really enjoy it. So I that's a huge lesson I've learned.
Milestones for you, if you had to pick one, what's had the most profound effect on you so far?
Career milestones. The first big one that was not the thing, but the thing preceding the thing. And I think this is important because it's this is, again, not going to feel on the bumper sticker, but I'll make it quick. I had auditioned for Melbourne Theatre Company's production of Urinetown, directed by Simon Phillips, a show I desperately wanted to do with the director I desperately wanted to work with. I'm young, I'm in my 20s, just out of drama school. It's at Melbourne Theatre Company, which is so iconic. And I was like, well, I would love to be in this. I auditioned. I was on hold, which for non-actors, it just means you haven't got the gig, but they haven't told you no yet. You don't really know what you're waiting for. It's not good. It's not bad. It's just like purgatory.
Someone else might have been offered, don't know.
Yeah.
So
if someone else says no, you might be in.
It's the best way to stoke the insecurity.
For me at the time, being on hold was like, great. It's, I'm not out. And at the same time, I had wanted to take my solo show, Angry Eddie, and perform it at the Melbourne Comedy Festival. Now, I'd never done the Comedy Festival before. I didn't know any comedians. I didn't know anything about that world. But the cutoff date for registering for the Comedy Festival was looming, and I hadn't heard back from Melbourne Theatre Company, and I didn't know what to do. So I rang my agent and I said, tell them I'm not doing...
I'm out.
I'm out. Because I was like, this is something I can control, my own show. I can register it. I can perform it. I can do it. But if I wait around for somebody else and it might be a no, then I lose both things.
Yeah.
And I was like, do you know what? I have to make a decision about what the hierarchy of what I value. And I was like, you got to put your own work first and then put other things second. So I registered in the Melbourne Comedy Festival. And like I said, I didn't know anyone or anything. Over the sort of 3 weeks of Melbourne Comedy Festival, I built an audience. I built this unbelievable support structure of other comedians. I got welcomed into that world, and it totally kickstarted my creative career. I would not be writing on Broadway if I hadn't had success in that. It turned me into a original comedy, musical comedy artist. So that is the milestone that I think about.
Mistakes? Are there any that you kind of go, "Ooh, that was a bit of a doozy. Shouldn't have gone there"?
It's really hard. I've certainly made plenty of mistakes. Look, the one thing I always say to young artists is that failure is the teacher. It's the only teacher. When you are successful, you don't learn anything. You just go, "Oh, isn't that great?" If a show is a success, nobody sits around and has a post-mortem on why was it a success. You just sort of go, "Oh, it was a success." And even if you hated the people you made it with, or if it was a very uncomfortable period of making it, there's something about success that makes all of that stuff go away. And then with failure, all you're left with is why, what went wrong, and that can be harrowing, but it also, you learn from failure. So I wouldn't want to skip past any of that.
Yeah. Struggles. What do you think is the biggest thing you've had to deal with or overcome to get where you are now?
I've got a theory. Maybe it applies to all industries and all life, but I definitely think it applies to show business. I think that the whole game is about how do you accumulate disappointment and not have it ultimately change who you are? Because we've probably worked with lots of people, and we've also had disappointments. Everybody has disappointments, and they're really rough. And disappointment can kind of infect you and poison you. Mm-hmm. It can make you sad. It can make you bitter. It can make you angry. It can make you frustrated. It can make you afraid. And it's not to say that disappointment isn't real or valid, but it's how you manage your disappointment and stay buoyant and not let it poison the next thing that I think is the most important thing.
And how do you manage it so it doesn't? Because that's the magic there, isn't it? Because I think you're absolutely right, and you touched on it before, saying you've managed to find a way to handle the knocks and things as they've come along. Before we talked about Beetlejuice.
Yeah, and we know those people where it's like people didn't get what they deserve, or they didn't get the opportunity, or the thing that didn't happen to them, and it's so present in their personality.
Yes,
and it's so kind of like.
Sometimes a negativity, sometimes a bitterness, and sometimes it's just a limitation. That I mean, do you think it's about some kind of, again, that framing, talking about and getting perspective and just going, I'm so focused on this and I'm holding on to this so hard, this disappointment, this accumulation of things that are defining me. Yeah. And just sort of saying I won't allow them to do that. Bigger picture, there's always something else, something next.
It's so tricky. Yeah. The way I don't know how, I don't really know if there's a silver bullet for it, but the way I mitigate disappointment is I'd go back to work. I just go make some more stuff. I mean, as a writer, I'm really lucky that as an actor, sometimes, you don't have control necessarily on going back to work, but you can always do something. You can always put on a piece or do a reading, whatever. But as a writer, there's nothing stopping me from writing. And so there's always optimism in that, because I know that I could go and write a cabaret show and I could pay my $300 or whatever it costs now to go on the Melbourne Comedy Festival, and I can get back up on stage with my ideas. And if it's good enough, if I'm good enough, if I write it well enough, it'll find an audience and it will work. So I mitigate against disappointment by going, well, what can I control? Yeah. And there's a great Tim Winton quote in one of his books. Don't be bitter, be better.
Lovely.
And I think, yeah, that and gratitude for what you've got. It's very easy to
Sure,
to not look at
that. That is that perspective, isn't it? You kind of go, hang on, don't forget, don't let one hyper focus, you know, and just go, all I've got is this. I mean, just look around and see the other stuff too, and don't.
Yeah, why didn't I get that gig? Why didn't I get on that bill? Why didn't this show get produced? Why didn't I get? It's really easy to get jealous. We live in a world where, it's not fair, and. You don't hear about gigs or people get a gig and you're like, oh, I would have loved that.
But you did get this one and you did do that. And you have worked with those people.
You also go, what can I do? I can, and I also believe the Steve Martin quote, be so good they can't ignore you. I think that is true. Like, what can I control? I can be really good. I believe, yes, it doesn't always work out, but I believe that if you make something undeniably good, people will see it. And if you keep making great stuff, people will get excited about it. And it's your job to work out how you can make that great stuff. Don't waste your time. What did I get? What did I not get? No one wants to play with those people.
Yeah.
So you got to make good work. That's all you can do.
I'm reminded of Sunday in the Park with George Sondheim's lyric, white, a blank page, so many possibilities.
Yes.
Right, in that lyric, right? And you talk about that, you say, I go back to writing, I start again. And here I go. And from here, literally, it can be anything.
Totally.
Yeah.
And I think it's also important to constantly reframe. If you're looking at your sort of patch of turf, whether you're a writer or an actor or whatever, you're looking at the other people that do what you do and you're only seeing them as competition, you need to totally reframe that, because there is a lot of that around. I experienced that in New York too. Like, writers are really competitive. But it was weird to me because I'm only a writer because I was inspired by writers. I only write musicals. I wanted to be a Broadway composer because I listened to Broadway cast albums and I love the work of incredible Broadway composers. So it makes no sense to me that I would get to Broadway and be amongst these people that are the reason that I am there and suddenly despise them and despise their success. You can go, oh, far out. That's extraordinary work. But I look at Lin-Manuel Miranda and I go, there's no way in a billion years I would write something like Hamilton. It's not my culture. It's not my art form. So I can't be jealous of Lin-Manuel Miranda's success or his work. What I have to do is go, how inspiring that he found the himness of him and he crystallized it into a work of musical theatre that is so of him that it could be of nobody else, and go, well, what's the EddiePerfect? What's the thing that people go, oh, there's no one else that could have written that. Yeah. That's what every writer has to find, their own voice. And then you begin hating your own voice. You're like, oh my God, because it's not like the people that you love. I don't sound like, my songs don't sound like Stephen Sondheim. They don't sound like,
but they're you. They're you.
Yeah.
They said the you-ness of you. That's an awesome phrase.
And then you just have to live in the, if you're lucky, you live in this part where you go, I've written this thing and it doesn't sound like anything else. And so I'm terrified of it. But that's where the gold is. And I think you have to live there. You have to just sound like yourself and live or die by that.
Well, Eddie, thank you so much for talking with us today. It's so lovely to just sit down and catch up and that. But you're about to start Beetlejuice, and I cannot wait to see what you do with that. And I'm sure you'll make that very much your own. Because obviously Alex did it on Broadway, but this will be a very different killer. I've heard you talk about like having to get your fitness up, get ready, because it is manic. But I kind of go, well, you know what? You reap what you sow, my friend, and you wrote it, so now you got to do it.
If I'm not fit on day one, I will be by the end of it.
Awesome. That's it for this episode of McLaren Versus. I'm Spencer McLaren, and thank you for spending some time with us. If you enjoyed this chat, then please don't forget to follow and leave us a review.